It was supposed to be a night of celebration, a reunion of old friends catching up after months apart. Daphne Matthews walked into her best friend Haley Mercer home. The evening had all the makings of a quiet, uneventful night until Daphne stepped into the living room and froze. There, in the middle of the room, lay Haley, her body lifeless, surrounded by the remnants of the evening. But it wasn't the disarray of an accidental fall or a freak event. It was something far more calculated. Haley had been poisoned. But this wasn't just any poison. The substance was rare, undetectable without a thorough examination. It didn't burn through the system quickly like typical poisons. It lingered, its effects spreading over hours, slowly shutting down the body. Haley had been carefully watched, and as the hours ticked by, Daphne had no idea what her friend had been hiding. What was supposed to be an ordinary dinner quickly turned into a nightmare when the investigation revealed that Haley's death was tied to more than just a toxic substance. It was linked to a long-buried secret, an affair. Haley had been involved with none other than Daphne's husband, Ryan Mercer. The affair, hidden in the shadows, would soon uncover the deadliest secret of all, a web of betrayal that would turn a friendship into a tragedy, and a seemingly perfect marriage into the perfect crime. The small town of Havenfield had always been a place where everyone knew everyone else's business. With its tree-lined streets, charming homes, and slow pace of life, it seemed like an idyllic spot, untouched by the complexities of city life. Residents took pride in their community, and secrets were rare, often whispered behind closed doors, only to be revealed in time. Haley Mercer, 32, was no exception. She was well loved in Havenfield, an elementary school teacher, always friendly and dependable. Her life seemed perfect on the surface, a good job, a loving husband, and 2 children who adored her. Her best friend, Daphne Matthews, 30, shared much of the same. Daphne, a successful freelance writer, had been Haley's closest confidant since childhood. Their friendship was built on years of shared memories, from high school to the milestones of adulthood. Daphne admired Haley's family life, often spending weekends with her family, watching their children grow. Haley's husband, Ryan Mercer, 35, was an ambitious man, smart, athletic, and involved in local charity work. Outwardly, their marriage seemed solid. Ryan and Haley were the picture of suburban perfection. But appearances can be deceiving. Beneath the surface of their ideal lives, something darker was brewing. A secret that, once uncovered, would turn their world upside down. It all started with a betrayal, one that would lead to Haley's tragic death, forever altering the lives of everyone involved. It began like any other evening. Daphne Matthews had planned a visit to her best friend's house, looking forward to a relaxed night of catching up. The 2 women had not seen each other in weeks, and Daphne was eager to reconnect with Haley. Haley had invited her over for dinner at her home in Havenfield, a house just a few blocks from Daphne's own. The evening was supposed to be simple: a quiet meal, some wine, and the comfort of longtime friendship. Daphne arrived at Haley's house around 7 p.m., the familiar scent of homemade food drifting from the front door. She rang the bell, hearing the sound of footsteps inside. Haley greeted her with a smile, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail, wearing a soft sweater and jeans, perfectly relaxed but always warm. They hugged briefly before Daphne stepped inside, greeted by the hum of a soft conversation playing on the radio in the background. Everything seemed normal, almost too perfect. Haley had set the table with wine glasses, a steaming pot of pasta, and some fresh salad on the side. The kitchen lights were bright, casting a welcoming glow across the room. The smell of the food made Daphne's stomach growl in anticipation. But as Daphne settled into the kitchen, something felt off. Haley seemed distracted, her movements quick, almost too quick. There was an unease in her eyes, a quiet tension that Daphne couldn't place. Still, Daphne chalked it up to a long day, assuming that perhaps her friend had been overwhelmed with the demands of her life. After all, it was a lot to juggle, a job, kids, and running a household. Dinner started normally enough with the two women talking about their work, their families, and the usual catch-up. They opened a bottle of red wine, and Daphne noticed that Haley didn't drink much. She took a few sips, then set her glass down. Daphne didn't think much of it at the time. After all, Haley had always been cautious about her alcohol intake. But as the evening wore on, something strange began to happen. Daphne started to feel unusually tired, more so than she should have for the amount of wine they had consumed. She wasn't slurring her words or feeling drunk, but her limbs felt heavy. Her head began to swim, a subtle dizziness taking over. It wasn't until she noticed that Haley seemed to be in the same state that the realization hit her. Something wasn't right. "Are you okay?" Daphne asked, suddenly concerned. Haley, looking pale and with a strange discomfort on her face, nodded quickly. "I think I'm just a little tired. It's been a long week," she muttered, but there was something off about her tone. It was clear that she wasn't herself. Within an hour of dinner, Daphne's dizziness intensified. Her thoughts began to cloud over, and she felt as if she were sinking into the chair, unable to keep her eyes open. She blinked several times trying to shake off the haze, but the room began to blur. The wine was still sitting on the table, but it didn't explain how they both felt the same sudden onset of fatigue. "I think I need to lie down for a bit," Daphne said, her voice sluggish. "Maybe I've had too much wine." She stood up but stumbled slightly, unable to balance herself. Haley didn't respond, her own eyes heavy, her movements slow. Daphne tried to walk to the bathroom but collapsed against the wall just outside the living room. The world spun, and her vision faded. It wasn't until she awoke to a sharp ringing sound that she realized what had happened. Her head was pounding, and her limbs felt stiff. She tried to sit up but was met with a wave of nausea. Blinking her eyes open, she looked around the living room and saw Haley slumped over in a similar position. Panic slowly crept in as Daphne attempted to gather her bearings. She noticed the glass of wine still on the table. The glass Haley had been drinking from, and the one Daphne had shared, were both nearly empty. Her vision swam again as the reality of the situation hit her. This wasn't just a case of too much wine, it was a poisoning. She tried to move, but her body felt paralyzed. The faint sound of the clock ticking on the wall was drowned out by the heavy silence that filled the room. Daphne attempted to reach for her phone but couldn't summon the strength. Every attempt to move became harder. Then, as if in a distant fog, she heard sirens, nearby but growing louder. It was too late. Haley wasn't just asleep, she wasn't breathing. Panic set in as Daphne's mind screamed for help. She managed to gather enough strength to crawl toward the door, but her vision blurred, and soon she was overwhelmed by the darkness. The discovery of Haley's death shocked the small town of Havenfield. What appeared to be a tragic accident quickly turned into a murder investigation. Haley Mercer, a beloved wife and mother, had been poisoned, slowly, methodically. The poison, rare and undetectable at first, left no immediate signs, making it the perfect weapon for someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Detective Rachel West, an experienced investigator with a reputation for precision, was assigned to the case. Upon arriving at Haley's home, she immediately noticed the lack of physical evidence pointing to foul play. The house was undisturbed, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The wine glasses, still on the table, suggested a simple dinner that had gone horribly wrong. But the toxicology report revealed a darker story. Both Haley and her best friend, Daphne Matthews, had traces of the poison in their systems. The fact that Daphne had survived, though gravely ill, added an unsettling twist to the case. The investigation turned to the wine. A rare compound had been introduced into the drinks, one that took hours to take effect. It was clear that Haley hadn't been the only intended victim. Daphne, too, had been poisoned. The question was, who had poisoned them and why? As Detective West delved deeper into Haley's life, she found a web of secrets. Haley's marriage, seemingly perfect, was not what it appeared to be. A series of interviews with friends and colleagues painted a picture of a woman who had been struggling with her relationship for months. Haley had become distant, and one of her closest friends mentioned that Haley had been planning to hire a private investigator. The reason for this was unclear, but it sparked a lead. Had Haley been uncovering something her husband, Ryan, was hiding? The answer came from an unexpected source. Haley's old college friend remembered a conversation they'd had a few weeks before her death. Haley had confessed to the affair. She was having an affair with none other than Daphne Matthews' husband, Ryan. Haley had kept it hidden, but the weight of the secret had become unbearable. She had even considered telling Daphne everything, but something had stopped her. Was it guilt? Fear? Or was someone else involved in keeping the secret buried? Detective West soon uncovered another chilling detail. Daphne's husband, Ryan, had also been aware of Haley's intentions to confess. The affair, which had been hidden behind closed doors, was now exposed. But what troubled the detective most was the timing. Just days before Haley's death, she had written a letter to Daphne, confessing everything about the affair and apologizing for the betrayal. It was a letter that would never reach its intended recipient. Haley's tragic death had sealed the secret, and now the investigation was pointing to a much darker motive. The investigation revealed that Ryan had been seeing Haley secretly for months, and that Haley had been planning to leave her husband for him. She had expressed regret for the affair but had been unable to sever ties with Ryan. Detective West began to connect the dots. Haley had been on the verge of revealing everything, a secret that could destroy both marriages. Ryan, possibly afraid of losing everything, had a clear motive for keeping her quiet. But there was one more piece to the puzzle. The letter. Detective West knew it held the key. The letter had been hidden in Haley's room, tucked away beneath a stack of papers. It contained Haley's confession, not just to Daphne, but to herself. She admitted her guilt, apologized, and expressed a desire to make things right. But the truth was now buried with her, the poisoned wine sealing both her fate and the affair's secrets. As Detective West pieced together the final details, it became clear that Ryan had played a crucial role in the murder, but not in the way the investigators first suspected. He had poisoned the wine, partly to silence Haley, and partly to keep the affair hidden. The more the investigation unfolded, the more it became evident that Haley's death was the culmination of a series of betrayals, manipulation, and fear. Ryan had calculated every step, ensuring that the affair remained a secret and that Haley's confessions never saw the light of day. With the evidence mounting, Detective West was now convinced that Ryan Mercer, under the guise of protecting his marriage and his reputation, had orchestrated the poisoning. But the final revelation would shake everyone to the core. The truth was far more twisted than anyone could have anticipated. As Detective Rachel West prepared to close in on Ryan Mercer as the primary suspect, she received a call that would change everything. A breakthrough had come from an unlikely source, an anonymous tip-off, delivered in a series of cryptic text messages. At first, Detective West assumed it was a wild lead, but curiosity pushed her to dig deeper. The tip-off, which initially seemed irrelevant, provided an address, an old, abandoned cabin on the outskirts of Havenfield, far from the familiar neighborhoods and streets. It was an area that Haley and Daphne had never mentioned in their social circles, and it appeared unrelated to the case. But West's instinct told her this was worth investigating. When Detective West arrived at the cabin, it was clear that no one had lived there in years. The building was dilapidated, with rotting wood and broken windows. However, the moment she stepped inside, she knew she was in the right place. There, on a dusty table, was a collection of documents that had been hastily discarded. Among them were several pieces of evidence: police records, financial statements, and an old journal, clearly belonging to Ryan Mercer. As Detective West flipped through the pages of the journal, her heart sank. It revealed a side of Ryan Mercer that no one had anticipated. He had been involved in much more than just the affair with Haley. The journal entries described an elaborate plan to cover up his involvement in multiple fraudulent activities tied to a local business venture. But the most startling discovery came in a set of entries dating just a few weeks before Haley's death. Ryan had written about his fear of being exposed for the affair, his panic about Haley's intent to reveal everything, and how he could no longer control the situation. One chilling entry stood out. "I'll do whatever it takes to keep her quiet. If she talks, everything will fall apart. The business, the marriage, everything." The revelation shifted the investigation in a way no one could have predicted. It was not just Haley's affair with Ryan that had led to her death. It was her knowledge of Ryan's criminal activities and the extent to which he was willing to go to keep her silent. He wasn't just a husband trying to protect his marriage. He was a man desperate to maintain his control over a life that had started to unravel, and Haley had become the key to his downfall. As Detective West continued to piece together the evidence, she found more disturbing details. Financial records showed that Ryan had been diverting money from his business, using Haley as an unwitting accomplice to hide the transactions. It became clear that Haley's death was not just about the affair. It was about protecting Ryan's web of deceit and his ability to continue his fraudulent activities without the risk of exposure. But the plot took another unexpected turn when further investigation into the journal revealed something even more shocking: a list of names. These names were individuals Ryan had been blackmailing or manipulating for years, people who had been caught in his web of lies, just like Haley. And at the top of that list was Daphne Matthews, his own wife. Detective West now had to confront the full scale of the situation. The affair between Ryan and Haley had been a catalyst, but it wasn't the primary motive. Ryan's manipulation, financial fraud, and blackmail had been the driving forces behind the murder. Haley's death had been the final piece of a much larger, more dangerous game. The more West uncovered, the clearer it became that Ryan's actions weren't the result of a momentary lapse in judgment. His calculated moves, his careful manipulation of both Haley and Daphne, and his ability to hide his darkest secrets had all led to this tragic conclusion. Haley, in her attempt to confront the truth, had sealed her fate. She had threatened to expose Ryan, and in doing so, had unknowingly put herself in grave danger. Ryan, realizing that the investigation was inching closer to the truth, attempted to cover his tracks. He quickly moved to dispose of any remaining evidence, destroying his journal and attempting to erase his digital footprints. But it was too late. The web he had built was crumbling, and Detective West's relentless pursuit of the truth had finally led her to the heart of the conspiracy. With the pieces of the puzzle now in place, the investigation took a decisive turn. Ryan Mercer was arrested and charged with the murder of Haley Mercer. But as the case moved into the courtroom, it quickly became clear that this would be far more than just a case of infidelity gone wrong. The public was captivated by the drama, unfolding in the courtroom with every new detail revealing a deeper layer of deception, betrayal, and manipulation. The trial began with a sense of mounting tension. The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Claire McKenna, laid out a compelling case against Ryan. They presented the evidence that had been uncovered over weeks of painstaking investigation: the rare poison found in Haley's system, the journal detailing Ryan's escalating fear of exposure, and the financial records that showed Ryan's involvement in fraudulent schemes. The motive was clear. Haley had become a liability, threatening to expose Ryan's illegal activities, and in his desperation to protect himself, he had decided to silence her for good. The prosecution's strongest piece of evidence was Ryan's own journal, which described in chilling detail his thoughts leading up to the murder. It was evident that Haley's death had been a carefully calculated act. Ryan had poisoned her wine, ensuring it would take hours for the toxin to take effect, allowing him to escape suspicion. The journal made it clear that Ryan had not only planned the murder, but had done so with a cold, methodical precision. As the trial progressed, the defense tried to shift the narrative, arguing that Ryan had acted out of fear and desperation, not premeditation. They suggested that Ryan had been under intense pressure from his business dealings and his wife's infidelity, which had caused him to snap. The defense portrayed him as a man who had been manipulated by circumstances beyond his control, presenting his actions as a result of overwhelming stress and confusion. But the prosecution countered this argument by pointing out the meticulous planning involved in the crime. Ryan's actions were not those of a man driven by panic. They were the calculated decisions of someone who had taken the time to cover his tracks and eliminate a threat. The fact that Ryan had gone so far as to poison both Haley and Daphne, ensuring that Daphne would survive long enough to potentially witness Haley's slow decline, spoke to the level of control and calculation involved. This was not a spur-of-the-moment act. It was a deliberate and ruthless decision. Throughout the trial, the emotional toll on Daphne Matthews, the surviving victim, was evident. She was called to the stand as a key witness, and her testimony revealed the depth of the betrayal she had experienced. She described the dinner, the strange sensation of fatigue that had overtaken her and Haley, and her shock upon realizing that they had both been poisoned. She also spoke of the immense pain she felt after learning about her husband's affair, and how Haley had planned to come clean to her before her death. Ryan's defense team tried to discredit Daphne's account, suggesting that she was biased and emotionally compromised due to her relationship with both Haley and Ryan. They attempted to cast doubt on Daphne's recollection of events, but her testimony remained strong. The prosecution emphasized Daphne's role as a victim, highlighting the fact that she had been poisoned too, and had narrowly survived a death that had been intended for both women. The trial continued for several weeks, with the prosecution building a compelling case and the defense attempting to cast doubt on the evidence. In the end, it was the undeniable weight of the evidence, the journal, the financial records, the poison, that led to the jury's decision. Ryan Mercer was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The jury had no doubt that Ryan's actions were premeditated, and they determined that the betrayal he had committed against both his wife and his best friend could not go unpunished. As the sentencing came to a close, the courtroom fell silent. Ryan, once a well-respected member of the community, now stood as a convicted murderer. His reputation had been shattered, and the carefully constructed life he had built was over. The impact of his actions rippled through Havenfield, leaving a trail of devastation behind him. The community, once proud of their quiet, idyllic town, was left to pick up the pieces. The affair, the lies, and the murder had forever changed the lives of those involved, and the reverberations would be felt for years to come. Daphne, having lost both her husband and her best friend, was left to rebuild her life from the ground up. Though the trial had ended, the emotional and psychological scars left by the betrayal, the murder, and the secrets that had been buried for so long would remain. Havenfield would never be the same again. The conviction of Ryan Mercer marked the end of a tragedy that had ripped through the heart of Havenfield. A town that had once been defined by its safety and closeness now found itself struggling to comprehend the depths of betrayal and murder that had unfolded in the homes of its most trusted residents. The case had been one of secrecy, manipulation, and the deadly consequences of a hidden affair. It was a reminder that sometimes the people closest to us, the ones we trust the most, are capable of unimaginable actions. Daphne Matthews, once the victim of an affair she never knew existed, was left to pick up the shattered pieces of her life. Her world had been turned upside down, her marriage destroyed, her best friend lost, and her own life nearly taken. Yet, in the aftermath of the trial, Daphne began the slow process of healing. While the scars of betrayal would never fully fade, she found strength in the support of her community and the knowledge that justice had been served. For Ryan Mercer, the trial had been the final chapter in a life built on lies. His actions had shattered not only his marriage but the trust of everyone around him. He would spend the rest of his life behind bars, but for the families and friends left behind, the impact would linger far longer. His story serves as a chilling, reminder of how far someone can go to protect their secrets, and how devastating the consequences can be when those secrets are exposed. As the case of Ryan Mercer comes to a close, the question remains, how well can we ever truly know the people closest to us? What happens when betrayal lurks beneath the surface, waiting to destroy everything in its path? The murder of Haley Mercer and the unraveling of Ryan's darkest secrets serve as a haunting reminder that even in the most familiar and safe of environments, danger can be hidden in plain sight.